Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the INSTEM Acquisition Strategy Investor Presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and publish responses on the Investor Meet Company dashboard. You will be notified by email when these are ready for you to review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll. In fact, we have two polls to submit, so I'd be grateful if you'll be able to address the second one when it comes up to you in a moment's time. So we've submitted two polls. If you just select the polls channel on the right-hand side, you'll see which ones you have responded to as an attendee. With no further ado, I'd now like to hand over to Phil Reason, CEO, and the team from INSTEM. Good afternoon to you, Phil.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. We are going to switch our cameras off momentarily. We're not going to all introduce ourselves now. People will introduce themselves when they come to their slice of the presentation. So I'm delighted to welcome you. The objective of this particular meeting is to introduce you to two recent acquisitions, The Edge and DWise, and we have Andrew Lemon from The Edge and John Lavelle from DWise who will take the floor. It's great to see so many of you have attended an INSTEM presentation previously, but 26% of you haven't. So it's probably important that we very, very quickly tell you a little bit about INSTEM, but we won't spend time on a disclaimer. That's the team. What we're going to cover today, very high level overview and strategy, our study management business unit and the acquisition of The Edge. The addition of DWise, which will broaden out our regulatory solutions offering, and then a quick summary. So, who is INSTEM? So, INSTEM is a leading provider of IT solutions and technology-enabled outsourced services to the life sciences, and we are honoured that every day we enable our clients to bring their life-enhancing products to market faster. That leading position has been built up over 40 years. We have over 600 customers worldwide, including all of the top 25 pharmaceutical companies and the vast majority of the contract research organizations who undertake an increasingly large proportion of today's life sciences research and development. Although we cover more than pharmaceuticals, so medical devices, chemical companies, agrochemical companies, probably 90% of our business comes from the pharma industry. With that in mind, we share just this one slide around market dynamics. This is the chart in the top right, the total number of drugs in the global R&D pipeline or the regulatory stages of that pipeline. And if this chart on the right is growing strongly as it has over the last 5 or 6 years, in fact, the latest data has just come out and it will show that it has grown again in the last 12 months. If this is growing strongly, there's more demand for INSTEM's technologies and services, and INSTEM prospers. So in terms of our growth strategy, about 18 months ago, we shared a target that we wanted to grow from what at the time was revenue of £25.7 million to £50 to £75 million in revenue over the next 3 to 5 years. At the time, it felt like a stretching objective. I'm very pleased to say that we are making great progress on that, as you will hear. There are three elements to our growth, both revenue and profit growth. Today, we're going to focus in this one on the right, accretive M&A. So M&A. So this is why INSTEM is public. We IPO'd in October 2010, so we could raise capital and use our publicly tradable equity as part of our M&A strategy. Our last fundraise was last July, when we raised £15 million. Transactions are typically for us a mix of cash and INSTEM issued equity. As yet, we've not needed to use any debt as part of our transactions, but that's certainly an opportunity for us if that becomes appropriate. In terms of why we have this M&A strategy to complement our strong organic growth, it's all around the fact that the supply of life sciences, IT technology and outsourced services is extremely fragmented. This is not beneficial to the pharma companies. They regret having scattered their investment across hundreds of suppliers, and they are looking to consolidate the number of solutions they use and the number of suppliers they partner with. Unfortunately, INSTEM is one of those strategic partners that they would like to do more with. So they are frequently guiding us towards the acquisitions and the acquisition areas that they would like to see us expand. In terms of criteria, there are more than just here, but this is two of the top criteria for acquisitions. We are looking for successful, strong, established businesses that are going to be earnings accretive in the first full year of operation. Although both the DWISE and the Edge transactions will join us part year, they will both be accretive in 2021. And we look for acquisitions to deliver a minimum return on capital employed of 10%, rapidly growing to 15% plus, which is consistent with the rest of the INSTEM group. So some of you may well have seen a slide very similar to this. This is something that we shared when we did the fundraise and actually before that last year. It shows the three areas of INSTEM's business that we had last year: regulatory solutions, study management, and in silico solutions. And the highlighted blocks were areas that we were prioritizing for acquisitive growth. These were all green, but because today we are talking about DWISE in the clinical data management and biostats space and the Edge in non-GLP study management, we've colored those blue. One of the consequences of the DWISE acquisition, this is by far our largest acquisition to date. It's in an adjacent space rather than an overlapping space. We have actually added a fourth business unit, clinical trial acceleration. And you see where these business units lie in the typical pharma R&D timeline. So you have years across the top. Typically takes 12 to 13 years to bring a drug to market from initial patent registration. And you can see that, for example, our study management solutions span year 2 of the R&D process to around year 10. And the same applies for the other solutions. One of the critical things to say about the strategy where we want to operate, we will pick up actually on this slide. So I'm going to talk about the two business units at either end of this slide. They all have something in common, that these solutions are helping collect, analyze, report, and then submit data to the regulatory agencies with the confidence that that will have no undue observations from the regulatory body. But most importantly, the thing that is going to help our clients deliver transformational reduction in the cost and time to bring new drugs to market are not our fantastic workflow solutions that support today's R&D process, which certainly do make things more efficient, less expensive. But it's the ability to be able to leverage huge volumes of data for scientific insight. And what we're doing in our study management solutions and our regulatory solutions, now in clinical trial acceleration, is accessing huge volumes of data that can then be exploited within our in silico solutions business. INSTEM's had a a strong track record of financial growth. You see on the left here a chart of our published numbers, revenue growth 12%, compound and net adjusted EBITDA at 18%. I'm sure you might be interested to know, well, how big is the group today as a consequence of these acquisitions? So if we look at pro forma revenue 2020 for all three areas, original INSTEM plus DWise plus the Edge, our revenue would have been £48 million or thereabouts. We haven't disclosed a profit number, but Progressive Equity Research publish research on INSTEM. It's available from our website or the Progressive site, and they have had a go at estimating our pro forma EBITDA in 2020. So with that, I will hand over to Gregor, who will talk us through study management. Gregor.
Well, thank you, Phil. My name is Gregor Grant, and before handing over to Andrew Lemon from the Edge, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to study management. That's the group within INSTEM that the Edge has joined, and where we both believe we will be better together. So the study management stable of offerings includes solutions for enabling studies, assays, and scientific tests to be run. They streamline workflow, they manage data, they create reports for activities within both the preclinical and the early clinical phases of drug development. And now with the Edge, we are solidly in the discovery space as well. So I'm going to quickly talk you through the four existing areas that we have offerings in prior to the Edge joining. Our genetic tox systems are for the detection of DNA damage and the potential for DNA mutation. We handle in vitro and in vivo testing. They're used both for pure research, earlier in discovery, as well as to perform mandated regulatory required tests. And our offerings are used worldwide by more than 400 customers in 60 countries, including all the top pharma, CROs, and academic research institutes. Moving to Notochord, our offerings there acquire, display, and analyze signals during the execution of in vivo safety pharm studies. Now, safety pharmacology determines the risks or undesirable effects on physiological function, as well as adverse events or rare lethal events. There's a battery of GLP animal studies that are currently mandated and required later in the safety assessment process. Now, this regulatory requirement could change at some point, and in vitro testing and the use of in silico mathematical modeling is of high interest, and we're involved in both. Especially as part of an EU innovation grant we were awarded late 2019. And Notochord has a similar global footprint of customers. Moving to Provantis, this is our premier preclinical in vivo safety assessment platform. It assists scientists and toxicologists to plan, perform, and analyze the results of the critical preclinical safety studies that must be performed before a new therapeutic agent can be trialed in man. The outputs from Provantis, from which send data sets, are also produced by our Submit suite. These form the backbone of submissions made to regulators worldwide and are required prior to approval for clinical trials. And finally, AlphaDAS is used in early phase clinical trials, and these can be phase 1 and 2. With phase 1 being the first in human studies with healthy volunteers, mainly to confirm safety, a little bit of how the drug works, and maybe some early signs of efficacy. Phase 2 are patient studies and are about how well a drug works in the target disease itself or condition. AlphaDAS manages participant selection, data capture, review, and reporting. And again, used by global pharma, biotech, CROs, and independent research clinicals. Okay, Last slide before I hand over to Andrew. All of our offerings are domain dominant, with the same solution often used in a variety of different ways, maybe by a single scientist or by thousands of users across a global multi-site organization. We optimize the workflow for a scientist, and with greater access to meaningful data and results when it matters, this improves insight and ultimately decision-making. And with so many common customers now, we and they are seeing where there can be even greater benefits from more access to a broader range of data across all of R&D that Phil mentioned earlier. And lastly, the cultural fit with the Edge seems a good one. We like each other, and they join a group where we have successfully acquired all the offerings I've mentioned, other than Provantis, and successfully integrated them with the rest of the INSTEM family. So now I'm going to hand you over to Andrew, and you'll get a deeper dive into the Edge and their offerings.
Thank you, Gregor. Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak to you today and tell you a little bit about the Edge and the future plans. So it's very nice to be able to talk to you as the Managing Director of the Edge and INSTEM company. So why do customers come and choose the Edge? Well, one of the key differentiators that we have is our understanding of science and the business of rolling out IT systems to pharmaceutical companies. We combine those two to make sure we can deliver effective solutions that address the scientific needs whilst meeting the standards of IT. We build great customer relationships. We've had relationships that have spanned our entire existence as a company, which is almost 16 years now. We have customers that joined us for the first version and are still with us now. We focus on efficiency and productivity, which are really the paybacks for people for buying software. So people don't buy software because they want it, they buy it because they need it, and it addresses and helps them to work more efficiently. We do that in a very data-centric and workflow-centric way, focusing particularly on biologists, which are increasingly becoming more and more important in today's modern biopharmaceutical and pharmaceutical environment, and their collaborators as well. Again, focusing not just on small molecule discovery, but now on also the new modalities which are increasingly grabbing more and more market share. So where do we fit on that scale that Phil introduced earlier on? Well, our solutions fit across the early discovery phase into the early development and preclinical area as well. So we go right from target validation and target discovery through hit finding. So we're looking for leads that molecules that could potentially be active therapies, and right through lead optimization into early preclinical work. We focus on this overall process. All of those phases involve the same type of research, which is one of designing, making, testing, and analyzing the data before iterating again. And that's the process by which we can transform hits, where we just know that they're active, through into candidates that can go through to the preclinical work. We do that by supporting those decisions with data. And that's the big data that Phil was referring to earlier on. So we capture the data and store it ready for them to understand the data and the relationships, and use artificial intelligence and modeling techniques to extract more and more knowledge. We support the make phase with logistics and planning, resource planning tools to help them to be more efficient, and then automation and robotics in the lab work, followed by data analytics and quality control software to help them to make effective decisions to move things forward. So it's a platform-based product suite. The platform is called Byrails, and it comes as 4 modules. And roughly speaking, Byrails PTO is the workflow engine that helps them to make requests for results for their projects, to optimize the efficiency of that process, automate some of the decision making, and provide logistical tools for planning. Then the data management module, Byrails DM, helps them to capture the data, information and knowledge, and protect it as a hybrid electronic lab notebook, and automate the data analysis using an application called Morphit. We also provide supporting tools for managing inventory, not just of the molecules themselves, but also biospecimens and other things that they are collecting during the process of their research. And finally, they can register details of all those materials, both generated for and also generated during those studies, building up really a comprehensive platform of information and data used for decision making. So again, for design, the Biohub, which I'll talk more about in a second, supports the decision making, inventory and materials for the make phase, and then Byrails, DM, and Morphit for the test, analyze, and iterate phases of the process. Biohub is a relatively new product. It's been out in 2020 and deployed with large pharmaceutical customers. Biohub acts as a central repository and data storage facility for making big decisions. So it includes both the ability to register assays and then load data from both CROs and internal research, and then make those results available to decision makers, modelers, and artificial intelligence programs to make more informed decisions about where to move projects next. Not only that, but we also will migrate the historic data of an organization into Biohub, ready to support those future decisions. The approach we take is a combination of software, services, and content. And we specialize in areas like DMPK and ADME, where we can make the maximum bang for the buck, as it were, to return on that investment of buying the software. These are areas of routine research, which allow us to introduce efficiencies which save time and reduce time cycles. So overall, the Byrails platform is there to provide a comprehensive platform for biologists and their collaborators to request and track projects, to record information and knowledge, to centralize and store that information for decision making, and put all the supporting inventory and logistics work for doing that as well. It aims to automate some of the data processing, to reduce transcription errors, and reduce the time people spend trying to improve the quality of their data. So finally, one slide about why we joined INSTEM. For us, we're all about innovation, agility, knowledge, and developing the technology and platform. What we were missing was the ability to scale. So this acquisition by INSTEM will allow us to reach far more customers. As they mentioned earlier on, there's over 600 customers that we're looking to bring our solutions to, and to make us much more visible in the marketplace. So we can combine our secret sauce with INSTEM's reach and visibility and reach far more customers and scale our organization. So I think that's my last slide. I'll hand over.
Thank you very much, Andrew. My name is Mike Harwood, and I'm responsible for INSTEM's regulatory solutions, and I'm going to use SEND as an introduction into the DWISE and acquisition before John Lavelle picks up and describes that in some more detail. So hopefully some of you have seen some of our previous presentations on SEND, but just as a reminder, SEND is a standard that the FDA requires for the submission of data used on non-clinical studies. And this standard has been around since about 2017. And so anybody submitting an IND or an NDA for approval to move forward with a drug registration has to submit the data collected in Provantis, non-clinical data, in SEND format. And INSTEM, proud to say, is often called the leaders in SEND. INSTEM is SEND, and that's how people tend to think of us. A number of reasons for that. We contribute to the creation of the standard. We've been involved with that since about 2003, 2004, something like that. And we continue to devote a lot of effort to helping the industry to move this standard forward. So the standard itself is advancing. It's not static. It didn't just come in 2017 and stop. So that's a sort of moving target, if you like. And we're very well positioned. We have the largest installed base of SEND creation software. So it's probably true to say that the majority of SEND data sets that FDA receives have been through our software one way or another. And we also have the largest independent outsourced send services team. So people send us their data and we send them back that data in send format, or we'll check it for them to make sure the quality is good if somebody else has made the send. So we're doing all of that work, and obviously that's becoming very stabilized as a process for the industry now. And people's minds are turning to, well, what do we do with this, all this standardized data? And as you'll see later, data science is a growing interest area, AI and ML and all that good stuff. The pharmaceutical industry has really bought into it. So we're seeing people wanting to use large volumes of standardized data to run interesting software on it, to project changes in development programs, potential safety issues, all sorts of predictive work. To do that, you have to have the data. So one of the services we've identified and been successfully delivering has been the conversion of historical studies to populate people's data warehouses, because obviously that's something we're good at. And we reckon there are probably, I don't know, 1,000 companies who might be going to do that. And they're probably going to have between 50,000 to 200,000 pounds worth of work, depending on the volume of data, to get those studies converted and into their warehouse. So I hope that sort of reminds you about send, and we're going to see some parallels as we think about DWISE. And I'd like to introduce DWISE from two perspectives: statistical computing environments and clinical trial transparency. So starting with SCE on the left-hand side, which is a lot easier to say than statistical computing environments. This is all about the provision of the computing environment that enables pharma companies and their contract research organizations to do the statistical analysis and reporting that's needed for a clinical trial. It's a highly regulated environment. There's lots of checking, lots of traceability required of the software itself and the data that it's working on. And it's a critical path activity. It obviously stands between that company and getting its product onto the market. They have to get the reports written as soon as possible, the analyses done, and that data out of the door. Very critical activities done under a lot of pressure. And as I mentioned previously, we send increase in interest in the use of data science approaches around that regulated pathway. People are very interested in being able to leverage that clinical data for other uses. And I should say this data is in a format called SDTM. It's also submitted electronically to the FDA, and SDTM and SEND are very closely related, so the parallels are very clear. Turning to clinical trial transparency, that's all about the anonymization of clinical trial data and the associated documents. It's a regulatory requirement in Europe and Canada for newly approved drugs. And we're seeing an increasing use of the data within pharma, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So just turning to SCE for a moment, this is a really growing market. There's an increasing number of companies developing pharmaceuticals, and with that and the number of candidates in the pipeline, there are growing numbers of clinical trials being run. In addition to that, those trials are growing themselves and becoming more complex. I mean, I think we know from our experience in the last 12 months, we all know a bit more about clinical trials than we ever wanted to. So we've heard numbers like 30,000 patients on a trial. These are big projects. They generate a lot of data, and it's complex data, and it takes a significant amount of computing power to handle that data. At the same time, we're seeing the medical device industry ramping up its requirement for clinical testing. There's a new regulation called MDR about to come out, and that is going to drive the need for even more clinical trial testing. So that whole area is growing in size and complexity. If we sit that next to that, the expanding requirements for new tools, new approaches, then we're scaling in that direction as well. And our estimate overall is that the available market is around about £160 million a year, so quite a significant market. In terms of CTT, and this is my final slide before I hand over to John, and he can give you some more detail. The clinical trial transparency market, as I mentioned before, regulation in place in the EMA, with the EMA and with Health Canada, and they're both driving this forward with a phased rollout of new standards. So you can see there's what's in place today and then more to come. You might have wondered why FDA is not involved in this, since they're such a huge feature of this market, that they're still trying to get their heads around how they protect themselves against the possibility of inadvertently letting out some commercially sensitive data. And right now they're redacting what they release into the market, which really reduces the value of the data. So hopefully they're going to be able to overcome those concerns they have and join with Europe and Health Canada in the same endeavour. And I mentioned briefly anonymisation within pharma companies. There are two key drivers for this. One is just making data available for internal research, and the other is the software testing. Clearly there isn't a better source for really rich software test data than live data itself. So if you can anonymise the clinical trial data so that you can't work out who the individual patients are, they can't be tracked, but you can still get the value from the richness of the data that's in there, then this is a real advantage for companies that want to use that data internally but still comply with GDPR. So overall, that's the CTT market, and we think over the next 10 years that's going to be valued at somewhere between $450 and $500 million. So I hope that gives you a feel for those two really key components of DWISE. Let me hand you over to John, who will take you through DWISE in more detail.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So first I want to talk about describing why DWISE and help you understand that our customers see us as trusted advisors. But we really have a passion for helping life sciences companies to apply technology in their pursuit of human health and well-being. And that really represents in this phase 2, phase 3, right up to drug submission and a little bit past that, improving the safety and efficacy of their products that they're bringing to market. So we are trusted advisors. Many of our people came from the industry and are now part of our company. And we are thought leaders in the industry as well, participating in groups like FUSE and CDISC and helping to shape the standards of SCTM that are used in drug submission that Mike described. We also have a depth of technology experience in many of the technologies that are used in this space, such as SAS and other clinical trial analytic packages. So we are interfacing with the market in really two different adjacent segments of the market, or segments of the clinical data flow, if you will. So on the way to drug approval and submission, we have the clinical trial acceleration. A lot of what we do here is about optimizing and helping to accelerate the process of clinical trial analysis. It is a very human-powered, very broad-based kind of endeavor that involves a lot of people and a lot of different functions, so it has that complexity therein. On the transparency side, we enable our clients to submit data and share that information in a way that provides transparency and enables third-party research, but also protects patient privacy, really threads that needle of trying to make sure that you can use the data for insights, but also protect people's individual privacy. On the backdrop of this marketplace is that rising complexity that Mike described. And it comes in many different factors that kind of conspire together to create challenges for our clients. Medical science is advancing very rapidly, and we know this from genomic advances and research in that area. Software technology and the drive towards cloud-based systems, that's advancing very rapidly. Data collection, interpretation, and analysis is also complex, and the business processes of these large-scale organizations that are operating in this space provide complexity as well that works together to create a space where our clients really need a trusted advisor like DWISE and INSTEM to help them to navigate the space and understand how to make good decisions and implement with speed and efficiency. So let me dive down a little bit into the clinical trial acceleration space. In the backdrop of this, you have sponsor organizations that many of them are nurturing and advancing and developing tens of compounds or products with hundreds of workers in a massive coordinated data processing and statistical analysis exercise, all to prove that safety and efficacy. We advise them on things like technology assessment, technology strategy, and we also do design and build within this space. We address the entire breadth of the market, from the smallest of organizations to the largest. At the smaller end, many of these companies present as almost startup companies that are making that sprint towards the approval of that one leading compound. There are many make or break kind of moments for them, and they tend to approach us with a need that is very urgent to have an environment for them. That's when we offer a prepackaged solution, which is the Excel statistical computing environment. It's a very simple, very straightforward solution for them. They can get up and running quickly within a week, and they can be operating in a validated, compliant environment and doing their statistical analysis there. In the mid-range of the market, there is a great deal of complexity and uniqueness that starts to appear with these organizations at scale, and we address those oftentimes with a variety of different services and advisory capabilities that help those clients get just the right fit for their statistical computing environment. At the very top end of the market, we are helping the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world to build cloud-native statistical computing environments, and that is giving way to a new solution that we're bringing to market, which is a framework of cloud-based software services that can be used to construct a clinical statistical computing environment, and we call that Aspire. Here's a little bit of the stats on our business today. On the left side, our thought leadership. We have done many projects over the last 18 years as a company, working very closely with big pharma IT and CROs, and also with those businesses, helping them apply the technology appropriately. On the right side, we have built over the last several years a hosted statistical computing environment business that now has over 40 clients and over 5,000 end users that log into systems that we support on a 24/7, 365 basis. And those are the compliant, validated environments where they do statistical analysis for clinical trial drug submission. So switching over to transparency, this is really a newer space here where we are, as I said before, attempting to thread the needle between enabling the transparency of the data from clinical trials in through regulatory submissions and facilitating third-party research of that those same drugs and compounds. And at the same time, we are trying to protect patient privacy. So this is a pretty complicated process to undertake. And we have a tool called Blur that is a software system that enables our clients to perform anonymization, redaction, and quantifiable risk management. It's a very dynamic space that is evolving as the regulations evolve, largely being driven by EMA Policy 70 and Health Canada. And I'm very proud of our software Blur. It's quite a sophisticated software application that anonymizes both data and clinical study reports. And it's a big job, in fact. The clinical study reports that are anonymized can oftentimes be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages of PDF documents that have to be anonymized, where the data is blurred just enough to protect patient privacy while at the same time maintaining its usefulness for statistical analysis or third-party research. So in this space of clinical trial transparency, it's newer yet, but we have done quite a bit of work over time and participated in a variety of different regulatory submissions for EMA and Health Canada. And as you see on the far right there, hundreds of thousands of pages of digital documents that have to be blurred or anonymized in order to enable these submissions. All right, I'll hand it back to Phil for the summary.
Thank you very much to Mike, Andrew, Gregor and John. Before we get into questions, and I can see some are starting to be put into the platform, so I do encourage you to add questions. So we've seen from that one market slide and from some of the conversations from the presenters that there are some really positive structural drivers and regulatory regime changes that are stimulating the necessity for our type of technologies and growth through INSTEM specifically, both our software products and our outsourced services. We've got a very large client base that wants to do more with INSTEM. It generates high levels of recurring revenue and a happy client base to sell new solutions, whether we introduce those organically or, as in these examples today, acquisitively. I didn't mention it earlier on, but a philosophy we have is that everything that we introduce into the market has to be the market-leading product, either today or has the potential to be that market-leading product in very short order. It is a reality that the pharma industry tends to buy the best to support their critical research activities. And if you have the best technology, if you have the leading services, you will stand head and shoulders above your competition. Whilst it hasn't really been a big feature of the conversation today, there is an opportunity to move clients increasingly in the software as a service direction. That has all sorts of benefits, which I won't talk about here, both for the clients, for INSTEM, for revenue visibility, but also to be able to help access that data for further insight generation. We have tremendous opportunities for organic growth. We've seen how just these two latest acquisitions provide entry into some new adjacent areas and can considerably expand INSTEM's scale and reach. So with that, I will open up the questions.
Phil, let me just jump in just to give you a few moments just to review all of those questions, if I may. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Phil and the team take a few moments to review those investor questions that you submitted during the meeting itself, I'd like to remind you that recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be made available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. You'll get an email from us to notify you that is ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback's important to the company, and when the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected in order that you can provide feedback so the company can better understand your views and expectations. And just one final thing, and I'm sure you saw the RNS this morning, that the company's final results due to be released, I believe, on the 12th of April. We will be hosting a meeting for the company at 4 p.m. And again, you're probably sick of having emails, but you'll have one more from us just inviting you to that presentation to be part of the company's roadshow. I guess, Phil, if I could hand back to you, obviously we had some pre-submitted questions. You've got the live questions. If I hand over to you, if I could ask you just to remind you to read out the questions, both that were pre-submitted and during the event, that would be very helpful, and perhaps who they're from, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. So thanks once again.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And if I can ask the INSTEM team to put the cameras back on, please, and Mark, if you can just go to a camera view, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. So, Frederick has asked, how does the new M&A position, position your company now relative to certain larger companies such as Certara? So, a number of you will know that there's a business that's about 5 times our size, maybe 4 times. IPO'd on NASDAQ last December and is sitting today with a $4 billion market cap. So although only 4 times our revenue and profit, a lot larger than that in market cap terms. Certara, we have known Certara for many years. They provide solutions, IT solutions and outsourced services that are highly complementary to INSTEM, and we only very marginally overlap. In fact, one area that we overlap has come as a consequence of the DWise acquisition, because they have a clinical trial transparency service that they offer. It is not as tech-enabled. In fact, recently they've announced a partnership with a technology vendor to try and bring some tech enablement into that process. But generally speaking, we are complementary to Certara. It's really nice to see people like Certara IPO, to have a public comparable, albeit a NASDAQ listed one, and they're adding to people like Simulations Plus and Schrödinger, also public in the US, where you can look at valuations of similar businesses to INSTEM. We don't have anyone quite as directly comparable on AIM. So I'll take one of the pre-submitted questions, and I'm sorry for these pre-submitted questions. I haven't noted down who raised them. But has COVID-19 negatively impacted or benefited the acquired businesses? So let me ask Andrew first, and then perhaps we can ask John.
Sure. Well, it definitely had an impact. For us, it was very positive because we're not in a normal situation. We're fighting for time from the scientists to work with them on projects, and suddenly they were all available. So as of the first lockdown, it's been absolutely manic, and we've not really slowed down since. So in that respect, it's been very positive from a business perspective.
Great, thanks, Andrew. John?
Yeah, pretty much the same as with the Edge. Over at DWise, we definitely saw a lift going into the lockdown because it seemed that it was time for focus on strategic projects, and our clients really engaged us in a big way. So we did not see a let up. We saw a spike in activity.
Great, thanks, guys. So Frederick has asked a question about the size of the total addressable market or accessible market following the M&A. So hopefully, Frederick, we've answered that, because there was information shared, certainly actually by Mike, for statistical computing environments and clinical trial transparency. Andrew, I don't think there was actually something in the study management slides around available market. Is there something that you can just share?
No, I could comment on a couple of areas there. So first of all, on many of the areas, it's fairly early days for us, but particularly in our core market of ADME DMPK, we reckon on that market in the discovery sector of being about 20 million per year, and which we're sort of biting the cherry out at the moment, but we're planning to expand significantly into that. When it comes to the sort of platform informatics phase, there's a huge amount of potential there. We're relatively new to market with our Biohub platform, and so we're really looking for some growth in that market. And there, I think there's probably about another 100 million per year of revenue available for that space.
Super, thanks, Andrew. So again, I'll take one of the pre-submitted ones. Is the study management solution portfolio now complete, or are there still more solutions to add organically or acquisitively? Gregor?
You have the phone on? I'm not sure it'll ever be complete. There's always going to be something. Whether we acquire or partner with somebody is open. I think there's certainly a couple of areas we're actually involved in now that we could see some growth. So we're involved in some projects around digital pathology. That's a very exciting area. And also in vivo animal management, which is sort of within discovery. So now with the Edge, we can see some opportunities to maybe join the in vitro and the in vivo side, but certainly the animal management aspect and the links to Provantis. So those are certainly two areas that we're currently engaged with other people in the market. Whether they end as acquisitions or partnerships, we'll have to see.
Super, thanks, Gregor. So Ruben has asked, what type of visibility does DWise have on their consultancy, systems integration, and BPO revenue? So one for you, John.
Yeah, so last year was on to what, almost 19 in DBP, and this year we're pointed at about 22 and some change. So forward-looking growth looks good, you know, double-digit year over year. So yeah, we feel like the transparency side as well has tremendous potential to grow. The size of contracts that we've been able to get with our clients are oftentimes very large. There's also potential for backlog of retrospective anonymization of studies that have been done in the past. So a lot of potential there in growth in transparency to boot.
Super, thanks, John. So Vishal has asked, please can you confirm how these change your long-term, so thanks for clarity on the acquisitions, how do these change your long-term ambitions on organic growth and EBITDA margins? Previously, I believe you had aspired to mid-single-digit organic growth and 25% plus EBITDA margins. You will have seen from what's been released that the Edge has been tremendously profitable. If you've looked at analyst guidance, we expect the Edge to continue to be tremendously profitable. Andrew and the team have moved from a perpetual license and annual fee model to an entirely subscription model. So that is building really strongly, and we obviously really like that model. Most of the clients aren't deployed SaaS. In fact, there's a SaaS environment that's being used for clients to evaluate new versions rather than production work. But what that demonstrates is that the Edge platform is fully deployable SaaS, and that is no doubt going to be a direction of travel. The DWise business has been a little bit less profitable, but has had great revenue growth. So I think what we're going to see here is a combination of an increased rate of organic revenue growth potential, maybe a slight slowdown in our transition from low 20% EBITDA margin to our 25% target as we blend in that DWise financial performance. But then, as we've talked about, we've invested very heavily in the INSTEM global platform that is really leverageable, you know, sales, marketing, service delivery, customer support all over the world. And as our revenue grows, we don't need to scale that proportionately to the revenue, and that will deliver strong EBITDA margin growth. And of course, there's an increasing product component to the DWise business, as John talked about with Aspire and other opportunities, and they will add to both the recurring revenue and help margins. I think overall, the picture is a very positive one in terms of both revenue and future EBITDA margin performance. So Michael has asked, is M&A pausing for now to integrate these two acquisitions, or are you still actively pursuing further acquisitions? So undoubtedly over the last 9 months or so, with two very active acquisition projects running in parallel, we slowed down the hunt for new targets and tried not to advance the targets that we were looking at too rapidly into the process. That being said, we do have 2 or 3 very interesting candidates that we've been in conversation with for a good while. They were tolerant of the fact that we were busy and have patiently stayed in the wings waiting for some bandwidth. They recognize that that's beneficial for them as well as us. And so we are still hopeful that there is the potential to complete at least one more transaction before the end of this year. Michael has also asked, when COVID-19 recedes and more funds are directed elsewhere, will INSTEM benefit? So let's have a change of answer. Mike, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Well, I'm looking forward to COVID-19 receding anyway. That's definitely going to be a benefit. Are more funds going to be directed elsewhere? I think that's a very interesting question. Just thinking back to those clinical trial statistics that I had sort of subtly in the background before, those are just growing. I mean, there's no evidence that the pharma market is slowing up in terms of its appetite for bringing new drugs to market. COVID's certainly been a huge element of what's occurred in the last 12 months. But as I think Phil had on his first slide, we're talking about 13-year projects here that have been running already for a long time. And my feeling is that I think the industry will continue to grow and to thrive. It's possible, I suppose, with the economic effects of COVID that we might see some impact on healthcare spending from the government, and might that ripple through? It may do in years to come. The next 2 or 3 years, perhaps we'll see some slowdown in the income for pharma companies that might impact their R&D activities. But that's really hard to tell. But I think all the evidence is that they'll continue to grow, and they'll continue to look for new and innovative applications and services from us.
Great, thanks, Mike. So one of the pre-prepared questions that was sent through, which Andrew, I think, has actually answered during his presentation, but what is the single biggest benefit that becoming part of INSTEM will bring to DWise? John, let me put that question to you.
Yeah, I see the single biggest benefit really being the ability to step up to very broad strategic conversations in the relationships with our large pharma clients. So the ability to unite with these other folks here and the many people at INSTEM and the Edge that have so much subject matter expertise, and really elevate that to high-level strategic discussions that span the breadth of life sciences development. And what I hope is that inside of those discussions is a real focus on connecting the data across the entire data flow and harvesting all kinds of new insights and value for our clients out of that data.
Fantastic, thank you, John. So we've probably got time for maybe just a couple more questions. So KG has asked, what is a sustainable operating margin level in the midterm? Sounds like a good one for you, Nigel.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, well, I think you partially answered that earlier on, actually. I mean, we hit so 20% EBITDA margin last year, and I think we see that as sustainable in the foreseeable future. As Phil was saying, the blend, I think, of the Edge and DWise together with the INSTEM growth should see us continue to grow that margin. You know, we do still see 25% as a very achievable short to medium term target, and growing past that as well as we leverage the both the infrastructure that we have, the move to SaaS, and all the other things that we talked about. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nigel. And then probably one last one from Frederick. So recent M&A has seen a decent component that is services stroke consultancy versus software as a service. How should we think about mix between the two types of top line driver going forwards? Rather than try and answer this now, for those people that have looked at the progressive equity research, you'll be aware that that research doesn't break INSTEM's revenue down by type. We do have some institutional investors on the call. They get access to the N+1 Singer research, and that does break down our revenue by type. And we've spoken to Progressive Equity, and we are very hopeful that they will do the work to be able to provide that revenue breakdown by category when they issue their research accompanying our results announcement for FY 2020 on the 12th of April. So rather than try and answer that now, because it's obviously quite a complicated answer with multiple types of revenue, Please look out for that. And we've obviously now put a little bit more pressure on Progressive Equity to get that work done so that they can meet the expectation I've just set with you all. So with that, I will thank you all for joining. As Mark said, there will be another IMC presentation with our results. We'll give you perhaps a little less dive into DWISE and the Edge and a broader view across the group. Thank you very much for your interest, and for those many people that said you're already INSTEM shareholders, thank you very much. You are helping us enable our clients to bring their life-enhancing products to market faster. Thank you all.
Phil, and to the rest of the INSTEM team, thank you very much indeed for your presentation and updating investors. And thank you to all of those investors who took the time to send in questions both ahead of the event and during the event itself. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback. If you access this meeting from our website, then the feedback page will appear. If you access this meeting via the link sent you by email, you'll simply be asked to log back in to submit your feedback. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it is very beneficial to the company to better understand your views and expectations. On behalf of the management team of INSTEM, I'd like to thank you very much for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, and good afternoon to you all.